I bet you're feeling like you're in the AI whirlwind these days. You're shipping a bunch of content, and the old KPIs aren't really telling you how you're performing. The business impact feels a bit opaque. You've got ad blockers, cookie deletion, AI, so many things are changing. Here's what didn't change. Buyers are still doing research. What did change is that they're doing it in new places. And the sad reality is the places where they're doing that research, places like LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, WhatsApp, and AI, they're just not even close to being trackable in a way that we feel comfortable with. So what I want to drop on you today is a step-by-step framework to do a few things. 1, tell you if your customers are even there. 2, how to use the different models to track what they already believe about your brand. So here's the step-by-step framework to how we're going to figure this out. First thing we have to do is understand, are our customers even in these new hard-to-track places? The second thing I'm going to recommend as it relates to AI is, what do the models already know about your brand? And let's take it to the third thing, which is anything that's unbranded. Are you even tracking the right prompts, and how to think about tracking the right prompts? Because I know there's a world of confusion. Because remember, your job as a marketer is not just to be seen and get a bunch of AI visibility. It's to turn visibility into people believing something about your brand and then choosing your brand. From what I can see, most teams are reacting to AI the wrong way. Now that we know our customers are out there on AI, too many of us are jumping to, what prompt should I put in? I actually would say take a step back and instead look at, what is the propensity that my customer is highly likely to be in these places? That's why I recommend SparkToro. It's really one of the only tools you can use outside of other tools, maybe like Datos or SimilarWeb. How do people who visit my website or type in certain search terms, what other types of sites do they visit as it relates to AI? Are they more likely to use WhatsApp? Are they more likely to use LinkedIn? Those are the kind of things that you're going to want to know. SparkToro gets it to you at a really good price. So let's assume that you went to SparkToro and found out that yes, my customers are highly likely to be using AI to answer questions. Congrats, you found out what most of us already know. But it's not just to be in the answers and say you're visible. The question is are you visible in a way that aligns to your brand? Is that new product that you launched mentioned when I asked ChatGPT, tell me about, in your company name? Or did that product launch not make its way into the training data? Look at the positioning. Is the way that your brand is positioned in AI answers consistent with the way that you want to be positioned? For a long time, my brand was positioned as a Philadelphia-based company because we put it in our footer on every page of our website. It wasn't until we started to put in other metrics and statistics about our company did we change our positioning in those answers. So this isn't overly hard. Go into ChatGPT and type in, tell me about, and your company name. Look at the answer. Then run it 5 or 10 times. And then see what parts of those answers repeat themselves. After you run this stuff enough, you start to build up a gut and understand when somebody asks a certain type of question, how these different models kind of lean one way or the other. I know you probably don't want to do the homework, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Now's the time for you to write down the things that you wish anyone knew about your brand. And then when you go in and type in prompts about your brand, like tell me about my company, what's the gap between the two? And now you've got what I call like an AI brand gap analysis. Next step will be, how do you fill those things in? So that's the branded component. What about non-brand? For me, I think it's absolutely fine to use a tool like Also Asked to try to find the people also ask questions. What about non-brand? For me, if you're doing non-brand, it's a good enough start to take all that intelligence that Google has that triggers people also ask questions and then turn them into questions that you start tracking. It is far from optimal, but it's a way for you to get started. It's also not overly biased by whatever it is that you think people are putting in. Now, I know that there's research that shows how people search, how many words they put in their prompts. We can put that research up, but you got to get started somehow, some way. So this is the way that I recommend you get started. Take those people also asks, get them at scale from a tool like Also Asked, and then run them and see whether or not you're visible. So your second step, get a minimum viable tracker up and running. There's going to be 1,000 caveats why your prompts might be wrong. We'll get to that later. So now if you want to solve for that problem, just phone a friend, find an old client, find 5 current clients. Say, I'll pay for your Starbucks for the whole year. Can you go through solving a problem using an LLM of your choice? I can record a video of what you're asking and how you're asking. That's the intel that's going to take you from people also ask style questions to things that your customers might be actually more likely to type in. So do you have 5 clients or 5 friends? Ask them to do it. It's not that hard. Some of the pushback you might get is that it's not enough people, the sample size is small. I think listening to one customer has made me more empathetic than listening to zero. And by listening to even a few people, you get to understand the language and the words they use, the things that inspire trust and distrust, the things that make them a little bit more skeptical that they might see in an answer. And I think all of those will help you to come up with better prompts to track in the future. All right, part one is done. You've now benchmarked some of your visibility. Now we want to improve our visibility, right? First thing you want to do, map out your citations. You have to stop letting other sites define, now I want to optimize that visibility. The most important thing you can do is understand for your brand how many citations are coming from your own site and your own controlled properties, and how much is being said about your brand that's coming from places where you have no control and no influence. And if it was me, I would want to increase my own answer percentage. How often am I the source that ChatGPT is using to answer my customers' potential questions? And then I would look for my next level, which is what's influenceable. So it might not be on my site, but it might be a speaker bio. It might be your mentions in press releases where you can control a bit more about what is said about your brand and your business. And then you've got parts that are completely unowned, sites like review sites and maybe Reddit and Glassdoor. Maybe those kinds of sites are the ones where you don't have much influence at all. So if they are starting to show up a lot in the answers, you might want to look at what kind of questions are triggering those. And then what might you be able to write in owned or influenced places? So now, my friends, you got a bit of a plan. Strengthen what you own, update what you can influence, and where you can't control the narrative, start to use that to write some of your new content so that answers are showing up in the way that you want your brand to be presented. So now let's move on to the next step. A lot of brands aren't losing because their competitors are just better. They're losing because someone else is willing to say something on the internet that they are unwilling to say. And therefore, LLMs are going to be picking up on the things that people are willing to say. How many of us in the SaaS world end up seeing companies that do comparisons of their site against another site? But then another company will say, I don't want to do that. That's okay. I understand that. But what you also are signing up for is allowing other websites to completely control the narrative when customers go to compare you to another company. So now they're reading your competitor's version of who they think you are versus your version of who you actually are. So the kind of questions you might want to ask yourself, what kind of comparisons are happening and where are they happening? Where our voice isn't even in the room. And we should probably start to write that content as well. And what are third parties saying about us that we're not willing to either say about ourselves or that we're not willing to address in a public way that is honest and direct? All right, now on to our next step. I said it a little bit before, but repetition is a major lever. We have done the research. That shows that stadium naming significantly influences how often companies show up in those cities. Why? Because their names are constantly repeated in those places. Like I mentioned before, if I were you all, I'd start to look at what sections of my site owned are constantly repeated. And those will be some of the first things I would recommend. I have an example here where we changed the footer on our website. And just changing the footer within 36 hours changed the answer ChatGPT was giving people about the prompt, tell me about Seer Interact. That's what I mean when I talk about optimizing. Now I'm going to give you a little something that's been working for us. Today, I will admit, a lot of low quality listicles rank and do well, and it drives me nuts. I don't want to be a part of that work because I've been around long enough to know that eventually that will not work, or people will lose all faith in the answers that they get. This happened with Google. Early days, you could just put the keyword at the bottom of your page 18 times and win. Then eventually Google said, we got to find a way to trust you better. So my hope for you is that you send out trust signals as well. And I'll tell you what we've done in our business. We've taken our proprietary data, sliced it, and consistently, time after time after time, have come out with study after study after study. These studies have gotten us into some of the largest publications in our space. We've gotten into Fortune magazine and Inc. magazine. We've gotten into industry sites like Ahrefs or SEMrush. We've gotten into publishers like Search Engine Journal. And these places are high quality sources. And I'm telling you, it's when you take your own data and your own opinions on that data and share it as studies, journalists who are using deep research these days pick up. And by them picking it up, we are in more trade journals than we've ever been. So we're going to keep our foot hardcore on sharing what we know and taking our proprietary data and turning them into studies, because we're getting high quality sources in the AI that way. Now, we talked a lot about visibility. We talked a lot about optimizing that visibility. Now we got to talk about that middle piece and that end piece. Are you going to be believed and chosen? The last tip I just gave you around being in these publications is part of being believed. People tend to believe that search engine land or eMarketer is a higher quality source than marketing-statistics-.info. So we want to be in places that when people see it and they see our brand name associated with it, they're more likely to believe in us. But now we've got to move that belief into being chosen. So the first thing you have to do, stop confusing AI visibility with impact to your bottom line. This is where teams get burned. And yes, someone in an organization was upset they weren't showing up in AI. But when they said, I'm upset I'm not showing up in AI, their belief was that they were going to get more revenue from showing up in AI. So yes, you can short-term get them off your butt by showing that visibility is increasing, but they're always going to ask what it did to the bottom line. And that's why you need this thing here, offsetting metrics. Being seen, great start. Being believed and then chosen is where the dollars are made. So you need to be able to show those things against each other to make sure that your increase in AI visibility is also resulting in an increase in people believing things about your brand. What might that sound like? Increased homepage traffic, increased branded search, increased direct traffic. So I want to show my visibility against those metrics. And then chosen are things like newsletter signups, MQLs, God forbid, revenue. So over time, you should be able to show AI visibility growing against something like people signing up for your newsletter, against MQLs. That's the way that I think we're going to make sure we do this thing the right way and it doesn't just become another vanity metric. Overlaying metrics forces honesty. If visibility is increasing and branded search isn't, maybe you're being seen a lot, but nobody's really remembering you. Branded searches are rising. If your AI visibility is rising and you do have more homepage and direct traffic, that means you're getting people to your site. Maybe they're believing you. But then now you got to look at your MQLs. Now you've got to look at your revenue over time. Maybe it's not turning in to the metrics that you hoped. Hey, my friends, so this is what keeps you from spending 6 months building an AEO or GEO program that looks great in screenshots, all that visibility going up to the right, but it fails in the boardroom. So start getting these data points right. AI visibility, branded search, homepage and direct, conversions, and pipeline. All right, if you've made it this far, here's the system. First thing, confirm that customers are even using the tools before you build strategies for them. That's SparkToro. See what these models repeat about your brand. Every week, drop in, tell me about in my business, and start to see what's consistent. Third thing to do your brand gap analysis. See what is said about your brand versus what you wish was said about your brand consistently. Track that non-brand visibility in the LLMs. You can use people also ask questions to get your feet under you. Then you want to phone a friend. Get 5 friends. Watch them try to solve a problem that your company answers using an LLM, and then go back and fine-tune those people also ask prompts that kind of came to you algorithmically. Now that you've got your visibility, start being smart about what's owned, what's influenceable, and what's unowned. And as you figure those things out, start optimizing them to increase that visibility. And of course, the last thing, you've got to take that increase in visibility and make sure that it's helping you to be believed and chosen.